Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Aquarian Mind podcast. Today's podcast episode number 150. I'm your host, Jamel Crothers. It's Book Insight Friday. We're still continuing with A Woman's Worth. And we're up to A Woman's Worth Part 5. We've got two more books to do. So today's one of them, and then next week we get to Part 6. And then we shift to other things in regards to other books. But anyway, A Woman's Worth Part 5, well, it was an important book for me. But then again, every book's important, right? Right. But anyway, domestic violence is a subject that bothers me, and I've seen it for myself in my life, and I needed to write a book that focused on this, but I did it in a different way. I decided to write it from a therapist's perspective where she would tell stories of survivors of domestic violence. So the story takes place really at the main character's office, which is, her name is Sylvia, and most of the time where she is telling the stories of young women who survived domestic violence. And each story has different situations and circumstances, and that was the goal from the get-go when I started planning this book. And I wanted the stories to be impactful, where everyone feels something and can relate to at least one of these characters. I'm not going to tell you how many characters in the book because, well, I don't really want to give away the book that much. I mean, I'm already telling you really what the book consists of. Now, there are some surprises with the main character, Sylvia, as I wanted to have a story of her life incorporated into the book. I didn't want it to be like, oh, she's just a therapist healing people and helping people. And that's wonderful. You know, I love stories like that. I mean, look, I've already talked about, how I went to therapy in 2020, and, you guys know that story. But anyway, I wanted her life and her backstory to shine through so you guys as readers can get a feel for who she is, where she comes from, and what events inspired her decision to go into the career that she's currently in, which is mental health and therapy. Now, some tough moments in writing this book, well, some of the storylines that I did brainstorm. There is one character, you'll feel her pain, anguish, and sorrow. And I don't want to say the character's name because then that would be, well, giving away too much of the story. But what I will say is not all stories have good endings. I can't sit here and deny, like, I write tough content. I do, and it's hard, and I don't like to write fairy tale endings all of the time. And, if you guys do choose to read my books and my content, trust me when I tell you, it is nothing grand about a lot of the content that I've written. And the only book I can truthfully say, has a happy ending is Living Life to the Fullest. And obviously, the title of that speaks for itself. Now, the story is important for everyone to read, and I want you all to take something from this. Because domestic violence, well, it's a major problem. And while I can, like I said, post the statistics, I will always say that the stories will be more important than reporting and writing the stats of the, all of that stuff. I'm not sitting here saying that statistics aren't important, because the reality of it is that they are, because we need to be able to look at things from a broader perspective and see what's going on in the world and why and what's causing it and things of that nature. So causation is, a way to, look at statistics and say, okay, like, we need to work on this, and this, and let's figure out this, and how do we get to this place, and, all of the things that, help us in regards to statistics. Domestic violence not only happens to women, it does happen to men. And yes, I have written, domestic violence regarding men. So, that's, A Man Who Lost His Soul. That's a standalone book that I wrote quite some time ago. And that was a fulfilling book to write. But domestic violence seems to be a lot more prevalent with women, unfortunately, whether it's straight relationship, lesbian relationships, whatever it is. The reality of it is that, we need to really start honing in on this and changing this. And, uh, a lot of us are products of our environments and what we see and what we grow up in. Sometimes, our minds and our brains will normalize that, and we get into situations where it really isn't normal and it's not okay. And that's a process of getting to the core and crux of that, right? So when I'm writing a book like A Woman's Worth Part 5, I didn't want to just write it where it was one character and she talks about her story, and she maybe talks about her childhood, how she grew up, and then she gets into a relationship and she thinks the guy is great, and then he turns into a narcissistic crazy man, to put it in nicer terms, since I try not to be vulgar in my podcast. And then it all goes downhill from there, right? We all hear that kind of story. But with this book, you're going to get different stories and different characters and different perspectives. Now, will it be easy to read? No, but a lot of my content isn't easy to read. And it's more to say, like, damn, like, this is tough. This is hard. Like, I need everyone to feel. I need everyone to emote, because if I'm feeling and emoting while I'm writing it, then I hope that when people are reading it, they're feeling and emoting themselves. And I will admit and say that I've had to, take a moment and stop and go, wow, I'm really writing this. And I do have to write this, because this has to be said. And I go down that road. And there's things I've seen, and stories I've heard, and stories I've read, and and they're tough. They're tough to see, they're tough to hear. When you hear it, it's unfortunate. When you see it, it's a whole different dynamic. And for me to write it, it means that I've got to put you there. I've got to get you to visualize that, and then the process of women healing through it with therapy. So that's another side of it, and another spectrum to look at. Because unfortunately, a lot of people don't have, and I'm just talking about people in general, don't have the opportunities to go to therapy and get that help that they need, either because they can't afford it, or they're ashamed, or whatever other life situations and circumstances are bestowed upon them. So, I needed to make sure that, these stories are impactful, and they are important. And I always say that I want to write stories that stand the test of time. So domestic violence is going to be an unfortunate situation where we're going to be discussing these things for years to come. And I hope we get to a place where this isn't as prevalent of a social issue that goes on in the world. I wanted to get to a place where, we're not talking about this on a constant, consistent basis, that, men and women are able to, work through, their childhood traumas and certain things that they've seen, and be able to get to a place where they can be in happy, healthy relationships. And I always say, unfortunately, that hurt people hurt people. Not always, not all the time, but it does happen some of the time. And we've got to, work through what we need to work through. And, my hope is to always change the world one book at a time. That's my mantra. That's what it's been from the first book that I published in February 2016. And that will continually be my mantra. So I just want you guys to know and understand that I put my heart and soul into a lot of these books. I read the stories. I observe social media. I watch certain things intentionally to really program my mind to get a full understanding of what's going on around the world. And the world is a very crazy, strange place right now. I don't want to say it's horrible, it's bad, all that stuff. I don't want to put negative connotations on it, but, it's a sad reality that we're dealing with. So anyway, that's how I went about writing A Woman's Worth Part 5. I hope you guys enjoy listening to how I go about these things. And obviously, my books are available pretty much everywhere except Amazon. And obviously, that's for business purposes and reasons. It looks like since I've taken my books off of that platform, it's gotten progressively worse. And I'm thankful that I bowed out. Anyway, that's my podcast for today. I thank you guys for listening. As always, have a good weekend. Be good, everyone, and go accomplish your goals.